Hi, my name is Eric Polerecky, and today I'm going to run through a little demo of getting started with AutoMapper in a WCF service. AutoMapper is a open source project created by Jimmy Bogart, and really simply it will take one object and it will transfer them to another object. I've been using it a lot lately in building WCF services that use the entity framework as their ORM, where I don't want to expose infrastructure bits to my disconnected client. A lot of people are using AutoMapper to generate their view model when doing MVC or MVVM. However you're going to use AutoMapper, it's so simple to get set up and it saves so much time. It's really hard to think that I will ever use a project or do a project without using AutoMapper again. AutoMapper is on Codeplex. The code to actually download is on Google Code, and there's a lot of good articles, but the introduction article, Jimmy wrote this article. Jimmy Bogart is on Los Techies. So with that being said, jump right into the demo. So my demo here is VB. All the other documentation that I've seen for AutoMapper is in C#, and I do both, but I thought it would be nice to have a little VB demo of AutoMapper. And so what that means is you're going to see a lot of wasted code with getters and setters and stupid stuff like that. But this project is simply a demo of using AutoMapper. As such, it's not best practices of anything, so it's purely designed to demo AutoMapper, which should just take a second. So I have a couple folders here. We have an entity framework folder which holds my entities which are generated, pointed it towards the Northwind database and generated all these entities. I didn't do anything, didn't change any names or anything. So today I'm going to work with suppliers and products. We have our POCO, which are our DTO objects, and these are the actual objects that we're going to send down to the client. I don't want any of my clients to see any of this entity framework stuff. One thing that I should note about the entity framework generated entities, too many entities, is that there's a custom namespace. I want to make sure that maybe not on this demo, but any project that I work on, I like to have a custom namespace for the entity framework generated stuff, so that we know what's coming from the ORM and not anything that we created, what's going to be passed down to either the view or to the disconnected client or to something that doesn't need any of the infrastructure bits. So then my POCO classes, or these are the DTO classes, have a couple interfaces just to define the two different objects that we're going to be working with. The first one is the supplier. It's simply just a demo, and in here we have the ID, the company name, the phone, and then it also has a list of products. So I'm going to show sending down just a supplier, but then also how AutoMapper can map your nested objects. So like I said, lots of wasted code here for our supplier. Standard getters and setters. One thing I do have in here, instead of having a function to do the mapping to hand roll the mapping, when instantiating a new supplier, you could pass in a entity framework supplier, and then I'll do the mapping here. And this is the way I hand roll mappings before using AutoMapper, and I mean you could do it with just throwing something off here, whatever, however you do it. At the end of the day, it's just a bunch of ways of typing the same code over and over again. I don't really want to demo much of the WCF, but so we have our little service contract here and our operation contract for our one function, get supplier by ID. The one thing that I really like about working with AutoMapper and WCF is that the classes that I create that AutoMapper maps to feel very similar to the contracts that I create when exposing a service through WCF. So if you're used to using WCF, it kind of gives you that same feel, and it really makes you think about the objects that you're exposing at the definition layer instead of just writing a bunch of code to do the mapping and running through it over and over again and not really thinking about what you're mapping to what. So here right off the bat we should have something that works. Our new entities are created going against the entity framework. So if we pass in an ID, we should find the supplier, we should return it, and we should translate it right here into a regular supplier. Open our method, we can pass in a supplier ID. So now our supplier came back and we can pass in any supplier ID, yada yada yada. And so now here is the true AutoMapper demo, and this will really last like a minute. So all I did is download the DLL, I added a reference to the DLL in my project. Anybody else would. Here's my download. Can't really see it, but it goes to the DLL. Trust me, it does. And we're going to change this code up a bit. So let's go into our Poco class for supplier. We don't need this manual mapping anymore. We don't really want to hard code much of anything unless we have to. And so now in our service, import AutoMapper. And AutoMapper is, when we create our service, we want to define a mapping, and we want to, our source will be from the entity framework entities. We want a supplier object, and we want to translate it into a non-entity framework supplier object. So we can then create our Poco supplier or DTO supplier or whatever. And we actually just execute the mapping here of demo for entities suppliers, and then here we're just going to pass in the entity framework supplier and return it, and that should be everything. And this should function pretty much like we just saw, except we're not doing the mappings. The mappings are actually happening by, or being done by AutoMapper. So now we're still returning our DTO, happening by AutoMapper. And we're going to create another map here because the supplier actually has some products. And so now what we can do is we can actually return the product. And if you noticed in the test harness, it returned an empty list of products. We still need to do the mapping of the products, and using the entity framework, we're going to include products. So now we actually have the products coming back, and we're still going to return it. So now we should have our nested objects returned. Get a bunch of products, so let's do a different supplier. And we have a couple products coming back. Yay! And the nice thing is this is all done for me, so I'm not typing any code. The entity framework objects actually have, many more attributes associated with them. So if we wanted the supplier city, really easy, we could go into kind of like our definition, go back into our supplier class, cheat a little bit, create city. I know demos and return our city and city equals value. Alright, so now we're including city in the definition of our supplier, and I actually didn't do this before I do in the demo, so I hope this works. So now we should actually have the city included just by changing the structure of our DTO object. Because city existed in the entity framework object, it's coming back. AutoMapper can do much more than just translating the simple stuff, flattening, all kinds of different projections and formatting and that type of stuff. So take a look at AutoMapper and hopefully save you a bunch of time, and thank you for watching. Bye.